You ever hear someone say something that made you pause? A phrase that sounded like it came from a time when people spoke with rhythm, not noise? Words that carried personality, humor, and heart. Phrases your grandparents used without thinking, but if you said them today, people would stare like you'd stepped out of a black and white movie. America used to talk different. Every region had its own flavor. Every saying carried a story. You didn't just speak, you painted a moment. And somehow, those words made ordinary life feel bigger. People once said, "Don't take any wooden nickels," when they meant be careful. They said, "Hold your horses" to calm down, and "knee-high to a grasshopper" when they were talking about kids growing up too fast. These phrases weren't just talk. They were living pieces of culture. You could tell where someone was from and how they were raised by the sayings that came out of their mouth. Now they're almost gone, replaced by quick words, text, slang, and silence. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear them. In the kitchen, where your grandmother laughed. In the garage, where your dad told stories while fixing something that didn't need fixing. In every old movie, every dusty letter, every piece of who we were before screens took over. So tonight, we're bringing them back. 15 forgotten American sayings that once defined how this country spoke, worked, and loved. The kind of words that remind you where you come from. Before America was loud, it was lyrical. Every corner of the country had a sound. The slow drawl of the South, the clipped rhythm of the Northeast, the plain talk of the Midwest. But underneath it all, there was a shared poetry, a way of speaking that mixed work, humor, and heart. People didn't need fancy words to sound wise. They used sayings, and every one of them told you who they were. Don't take any wooden nickels. You probably heard that one once or twice from an old-timer. It meant, don't be fooled. Back when money was handled in handshakes and trade, wooden nickels were cheap souvenirs, worthless tokens dressed up like the real thing. The phrase came out of the 1920s, when towns printed wooden money during shortages. But by the time it hit the street, it meant more than that. It was a warning from one person to another. Friendly, honest, protective. Don't take any wooden nickels was another way of saying, I care what happens to you. That's what made those old sayings special. They weren't words. They were little acts of love. Hold your horses is another. Simple, universal. You can still hear it sometimes, but not enough. It started in the 1840s when wagons and buggies ruled the road. Hold your horses literally meant stop your team before you run someone over. But it grew into a lesson about patience. Don't rush. Don't jump. Wait for life to catch up. Our grandparents said it without thinking, but they meant it deeply. Hold your horses wasn't just about slowing down. It was about grace, about knowing that things worth doing were worth doing right. And then there was knee-high to a grasshopper. You'd hear it every summer. Someone would ruffle your hair, squint at how tall you'd gotten, and say it with pride and a touch of disbelief. It was the poetry of growth, a reminder that time never stops, that once you were small enough to fit in someone's lap, and now you're standing taller than their memory of you. That phrase carried generations in it. It wasn't just about kids. It was about the passage of time, spoken with warmth instead of fear. You don't hear that kind of language anymore. Back then, even ordinary speech had weight. When someone said, the whole 9 yards, they meant they'd given everything. It came from the length of a machine gun belt during World War II, 9 yards of bullets. To give the whole 9 yards was to give it all, no holding back. That saying crossed from the battlefield into small-town America, into sports, into family life. It became a badge of effort, of pride in doing your best, even when nobody noticed. Then there was, don't let the cat out of the bag. It sounds funny now, but it was serious business once. It came from old market days, when a dishonest seller might sneak a worthless cat into a bag instead of a piglet. If someone let the cat out of the bag, the lie was exposed. But in everyday life, it meant keep the secret. It was how trust sounded between people who didn't write things down. They just remembered and respected. Language back then was rooted in work, in chores, in struggle. A stitch in time saves 9. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. These weren't just sayings. They were survival. They came from fields and barns, from kitchens and front porches, from people who knew how much one mistake could cost. When you said, a stitch in time saves 9, you weren't talking about sewing. You were talking about life. Fix your problems while they're small. Don't wait until they ruin you. It was advice disguised as rhythm. The kind of phrase that could pass through generations without losing meaning. Every American household had its own dictionary of sayings. Some funny, some sharp, some so wise they sounded like prayer. Make hay while the sun shines. It meant don't waste your chance. It came straight from the farm, where daylight was gold and time was precious. You worked when you could, because storms came fast. It wasn't just about crops. It was about life, seizing the moment before it slips away. Those sayings were lessons hidden in laughter. They came from hard lives made easier by humor. The South had bless your heart, a phrase that could mean pity or poison depending on who said it. The Midwest had fair to middlin', the honest answer when someone asked how you were doing. Not great, not bad, just somewhere in between. Out west, they said, "This ain't my first rodeo," to remind you they'd been through worse and learned from it. Every region turned struggle into poetry. You could tell where a man was from by how he complained. A northerner might say, "Well, that's a fine how do you do." A southerner might mutter, "Ain't that the berries?" Both meant disappointment, but one had grit, the other grace, and somehow those sayings made life feel more alive. They gave the ordinary days color. You didn't just work hard, you burned the midnight, oil. You didn't just get tired, you were fit to be tied. You didn't argue, you raised the roof. Every phrase was a miniature story. That's what language used to do. It turned life into story. Even the simplest sayings had warmth. Don't cry over spilled milk. That one came from dairymen, tired of losing a day's work to one accident. It meant let go. Don't waste your sorrow on what can't be undone. Today, people still say it, but without the weight of memory. Back then, it was survival wisdom, spoken between sighs and smiles. The truth is, those old sayings were glue. They connected people. They let you express something deep without preaching. They reminded you that life was hard but manageable if you kept your humor and your hope. Language made work lighter. It made pain smaller. It turned experience into expression, and expression into connection. You didn't need therapy. You needed a saying that made sense of it all. When someone failed, you said, "That's water under the bridge." When someone worried too much, you told them, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." When life felt uncertain, you said, "Come hell or high water." Each phrase carried faith. Quiet, practical faith that things would work out. That's what made the language of ordinary folks so extraordinary. It was built from struggle, yet it spoke of hope. You can still hear echoes of it if you listen closely, in the way your parents or grandparents tell stories, in the phrases that slip out without thought. They're little time machines hidden in speech, each one a piece of an America that believed in humor, humility, and hard work. So when you hear someone say, "Don't take any wooden nickels," don't just smile at the sound of it. Remember what it meant. It was a promise, a reminder to stay sharp, a gift from one generation to the next, because that's what sayings really are, small pieces of soul passed down in conversation. America didn't build its backbone with concrete or steel. It built it with words, short, tough, handmade words, the kind you could fit in your pocket and pull out when life got rough. Every saying, every phrase, every scrap of talk was born from sweat. When you trace them back, you find the same pattern: work, struggle, and humor. The three languages of survival. Take "pull yourself up by your bootstraps." That one came from the early 1800s, when boots had real straps and hard roads. It started as a joke, an impossible idea. You can't lift yourself off the ground by your own boots. But Americans turned it into a challenge. By the 1900s, it meant something else: self-reliance. Nobody was going to rescue you. You had to rescue yourself. That phrase became the heartbeat of a growing country. The story of men and women who built towns out of dust and kept going when the odds said stop. That was the genius of American sayings. They took hardship and turned it into pride. When someone said, "Keep your nose to the grindstone," they weren't just talking about work. They were talking about focus. In the old days, sharpening tools meant putting your face right near the stone, eyes on the edge, sparks flying. It was dangerous, steady work. To keep your nose to the grindstone meant don't look away. Don't drift. Pay attention or pay the price. These sayings weren't invented in books. They came from barns, workshops, and rail yards. They came from men who worked 16 hours and slept 6. From women who cooked for families of 10 and never complained. From people who didn't just talk about hard work, they lived it. Bite the bullet. That one came from war. Before anesthesia, wounded soldiers literally bit down on a bullet to bear the pain. Over time, it became a phrase of courage. Do what you have to do, no matter how bad it hurts. It was grit in 6 syllables. Same with burning the candle at both ends. It came from a time when candles were expensive, when light itself cost money. To burn one from both sides meant you were wasting what you couldn't afford. Your time, your strength, your life. When someone said that to you, they weren't criticizing. They were warning. Slow down before you run out of light, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. That came from farmers who lived on risk. Drop that basket, and you lose everything. Spread your chances. That was the lesson. You can still feel the truth of it today. These sayings were the language of survival. They weren't meant to sound pretty. They were meant to remind. People used to speak in warnings because they lived through loss. The Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, wars that took whole generations. You didn't waste words in those days. You said what mattered. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. It meant don't dream too soon. Don't measure victory before you've earned it. It came from farmers, but it applied to everyone. Patience, perspective, humility. Make hay while the sun shines. It was the same lesson in reverse. When life gives you a break, take it. Do the work now. The storms will come soon enough. That's what made old American language powerful. It spoke in both directions, warning you and encouraging you at the same time. You could fill a day's work with phrases like that. Put your money where your mouth is. Don't rock the boat. The early bird gets the worm. Each one was a slice of old wisdom, short, simple, sharp as a nail. And none of it came from politicians or poets. It came from people with dirt under their nails. Imagine a blacksmith in 1905, wiping sweat off his brow, handing a young apprentice a hammer. You want to get somewhere in life, son? Keep your nose to the grindstone. Or a mother in 1932, sitting at a worn kitchen table, whispering to her daughter, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket, honey." That was America's real education system. Kitchen table talk. Every generation passed down its phrases like heirlooms. They were free, but priceless. The saying, "It's no use crying over spilled milk," started on dairy farms, but became emotional wisdom. It told people not to waste energy on regret. Move on. Try again. Let sleeping dogs lie. That came from the 1300s, but Americans made it their own. It meant don't stir up old trouble. Don't pick old fights. Sometimes peace is better than justice. That's what these words did. They taught balance. You could fight for what mattered, but still know when to stop. You can hear the rhythm of those lessons if you listened close enough. Strike while the iron's hot. That's a blacksmith saying. Act while you've got the chance. Once the metal cools, the moment's gone. Don't bite off more than you can chew. That one came from cowboys, ranch hands, and soldiers who knew what overconfidence costs. Every saying came from someone who lived its truth. That's why they stuck. They weren't ideas. They were experiences carved into speech. Even the funny ones carried truth. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. It meant you can't turn something plain into something fancy just by wishing. A leopard can't change its spots. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Every dog has his day. Each one a mirror held up to reality. Not cruel, just honest. That honesty was the thread that ran through every generation. You can still hear it in old movies, in country songs, in the quiet wisdom of people who didn't talk much but said everything when they did, and maybe that's what made those sayings so powerful. They didn't just tell you what to do. They told you who to be. Keep your chin up. Don't let the bastards grind you down. It's always darkest before the dawn. These were not just phrases, they were promises. Small ones, whispered in hard times, passed down through families like prayers. America wasn't born from speeches or slogans. It was born from that kind of talk, the kind that turned struggle into survival. Even now, those phrases live in you. They rise up when life gets rough. You hear them when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when you're trying to hold on. They're the voices of the people who built the country before you ever got here. So when you hear yourself say, "Pull yourself up by your bootstraps," or "Keep your nose to the grindstone," know this, you're not just using words. You're echoing generations. You're carrying forward the sound of a nation that built its strength out of struggle and its wisdom out of work. Those sayings didn't just build America's language. They built its backbone. Character used to be a person's currency. Before resumes, before profiles, before personal branding, there was only your word and how you spoke it. Every saying, every bit of speech carried weight. It told the world who you were, how you worked, and what you stood for. America used to believe that how you spoke showed how you lived. A man who said, "Honesty is the best policy," wasn't quoting wisdom, he was living it. A woman who told her kids, "Actions speak louder than words," was reminding them that promises mean nothing without proof. Sayings weren't just talk. They were rules, codes, quiet measures of character that shaped how people behaved when no one was watching. Honesty is the best policy. It came from Benjamin Franklin, but it echoed through every small town and every schoolhouse. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a moral compass. People said it to remind each other that truth builds trust, that lies, no matter how small, rot everything they touch. Actions speak louder than words. That one cut deep. It meant you could say all the right things, but what mattered was what you did when it was inconvenient. You didn't talk about your integrity. You proved it in silence. These sayings were short, but they carried entire worlds inside them. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. The backbone of every decent conversation, business deal, and friendship for generations. It was simple, human, and honest. If everyone lived by that line, you didn't need lawyers, warnings, or rules. That was the power of America's old language. It didn't decorate life, it directed it. When someone said, "You reap what you sow," they weren't talking about farming. They were talking about consequences. Every word, every choice, every habit. It all came back eventually. That phrase carried faith and realism in equal measure. It was accountability, disguised as poetry. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That one burned with truth. It reminded you that meaning well wasn't enough. That laziness, cowardice, or neglect, even wrapped in kindness, could still cause harm. Those old sayings taught responsibility without judgment. They were firm, not cruel. They held you accountable, but gave you dignity. In towns across the country, they shaped the rhythm of life. You'd hear them at dinner tables and church pews, at work and classrooms. Parents repeated them, teachers enforced them, bosses lived by them, and every kid grew up knowing that words had consequences, just like actions. Mind your manners. That one wasn't just about etiquette. It was about empathy. It meant pay attention to how your behavior affects others. It meant think before you speak. It meant respect wasn't just for elders, it was for everyone. And then there was waste not, want not. It came from scarcity, but it built gratitude. People who'd lived through the Depression or wartime didn't waste a crumb, a nail, or a word. That saying taught discipline without punishment. It was wisdom disguised as survival instinct. You'd hear it in kitchens where leftovers became tomorrow's meal, in workshops where every screw was saved in a coffee can. It was about resourcefulness, but more than that, it was about respect. For time, for effort, for what others gave you. There's another that shaped generations. A man's word is his bond. You didn't need contracts if you had character. You made a promise, you kept it. If you broke it, you didn't need punishment. You'd already lost your reputation. That phrase was the backbone of trust in small-town America. Deals were sealed with a handshake because people believed in the power of their own word. That's what language used to do. It reinforced integrity. Don't judge a book by its cover. It taught empathy. Now walk a mile in someone else's shoes. It taught perspective. 2 wrongs don't make a right. It taught restraint. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It taught consequence. Every phrase was a quiet teacher, shaping character without sermons. Even humor had morals hidden inside. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. It meant dreaming without work is nothing. You made your bed, now lie in it. It meant take responsibility. There's no use crying over spilled milk. It meant let go and move forward. Every one of those sayings turned hardship into a lesson. And that's what made old American speech so powerful. It didn't just describe life, it trained you for it. When someone said, don't burn your bridges, you learned not to let anger destroy opportunity. When they said, a leopard can't change its spots, you learned that people's patterns matter more than promises. When they said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, you learned that control has limits, and wisdom is knowing when to stop trying. These phrases shaped how people treated each other. They created balance in communities where everyone depended on everyone else. You couldn't afford arrogance or cruelty when you knew you'd need your neighbor's help come winter. Sayings like, what goes around comes around, reminded people to keep kindness in circulation. They made life feel moral without needing rules carved in stone. Language kept people grounded. It made decency natural. Today we have more words than ever, but fewer that mean something. Back then, people spoke less, but everything they said carried the weight of experience. Imagine a 1950s father telling his son, don't get too big for your britches. It sounds funny now, but it meant stay humble. Remember who you are. Pride will trip you faster than failure. Or a grandmother in 1947 smiling at her grandson's mistake and saying, you live and learn. That wasn't scolding. It was grace. Forgiveness in 5 words. That's what's missing now. That mix of accountability and compassion. Those old sayings held both in perfect balance. They didn't preach. They guided. They didn't lecture. They reminded. And maybe that's why people respected them. Because they came from life, not from theory. When someone said, measure twice, cut once, you knew it came from someone who'd learned the hard way. When they said, don't bite the hand that feeds you, it came from someone who'd lost support by being ungrateful. When they said, you can't please everyone, it came from someone who'd wasted years trying. Old sayings were earned, not invented. And in earning them, people built something larger than language. They built character. Character wasn't a slogan. It wasn't a performance. It was a quiet consistency between what you said and what you did. These old American sayings were a map for that. They taught patience, humility, honesty, self-control, and courage, not by force, but by rhythm. They worked their way into memory because they sounded like truth. And even now, you can feel them living inside your speech, showing up when you least expect it. When life gets tough, you still hear your parents' or grandparents' voices. Keep your chin up. It builds character. That's the breaks. It is what it is. Those phrases were more than comfort. They were code. A way to endure. So maybe character isn't built in schools or offices or slogans. Maybe it's built in the small, old words we still whisper to ourselves when things fall apart. Every generation loses a few words on the way forward. But somewhere along the line, America lost whole ways of speaking. The everyday poetry that gave life warmth, rhythm, and meaning. The words are still in the air if you listen close enough, but they sound faint now. They belong to another time, another heartbeat. You used to hear them everywhere. At the corner store, on the front porch, at the gas station where the bell rang as you drove in. Don't put the cart before the horse. Better late than never. A penny saved is a penny earned. Little lessons disguised as conversation. Nobody thought about them as wisdom. They were just how people talked. But those sayings carried something we've lost. The slow patience of a people who believed words mattered. Once, every phrase had weight. When someone said, "Easy does it," they were teaching control. When someone said, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," they were warning against greed and restlessness. Rome wasn't built in a day. Patience. Every cloud has a silver lining. Hope. These weren't empty sayings. They were survival tools for the human spirit. They shaped how people handled trouble, how they saw loss, how they found humor in the cracks. America's old talk wasn't meant for show. It was meant for life. People didn't quote to impress. They quoted to remember. They passed down what worked. They didn't have therapy sessions or podcasts. They had phrases that reminded them how to carry on. The saying, "This too shall pass," was one of those. You heard it when someone lost their job, their house, or someone they loved. It was quiet comfort, not a solution, but a promise. The storm will pass. The sun will come. You just have to keep walking. Then there was, "Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today," a phrase that built generations of doers. It meant discipline before distraction. A reminder that procrastination robs opportunity. It's funny how that phrase has vanished in a world that's always waiting for the right time to begin. And you can't judge a book by its cover. That one carried decency inside it. It said, "Look deeper. People are more than they seem." It was the voice of humility, the belief that everyone deserves a fair glance before judgment. Those old sayings didn't just teach morals, they protected community. You could grow up in a house that barely had money but still feel rich in words. Every lesson, every laugh, every correction came with a saying attached. They shaped how you thought before you even knew it. They taught you how to fall, how to rise, and how to stay kind. They gave your mistakes meaning. They turned pain into perspective. A mother could stop a fight between kids with just a few syllables. Two wrongs don't make a right. A father could calm a son's pride with, "Don't get too big for your britches." A teacher could restore hope with, "Better late than never." Each phrase was a moral in disguise, a little spark of order in a chaotic world. That's the thing about these sayings. They were born from real life, not books. They carried the fingerprints of the people who made them: farmers, soldiers, housewives, miners, teachers. None of them rich in gold, but rich in language. They didn't waste words, because life didn't give them many to spare. Even humor had honesty built in. A day late and a dollar short. That dog won't hunt. A little long in the tooth. You could say them and everyone knew what you meant. They were shorthand for experience. The beauty of those phrases was their precision. They didn't need explanation. They cut straight to truth. Today, we have thousands of new phrases, but most of them vanish as fast as they appear. Viral words burn bright and die young. The old sayings lasted because they came from endurance. They carried time inside them. They weren't just about talking. They were about belonging. When someone said, "It takes two to tango," it wasn't gossip. It was fairness. When they said, "The grass is always greener on the other side," it was a reminder to stay grateful. When they said, "You can't have your cake and eat it too," they were teaching limits. Language shaped behavior. Behavior shaped culture. That's why those sayings mattered. Because they didn't just decorate speech. They built people. And when they started disappearing, something else disappeared with them. Not just the words, the patience, the humor, the restraint, the small dignity of speaking with care. And the way people once spoke reflected how they saw the world as a place to learn from, not conquer. Every phrase came from humility. It said, "Life is bigger than you, but you can still do your part." That tone is hard to find now. People don't talk in lessons anymore. They talk in noise. The rhythm of speech has changed. Faster, harder, angrier. The language of reflection gave way to the language of reaction. But those old phrases are still waiting for us. In books, in memory. In the quiet moments when something hard happens and you reach for comfort you didn't know you remembered. Because when you lose your job, when a plan fails, when someone leaves, what do you say? It is what it is. This too shall pass. The old words rise like ghosts, uninvited but welcome. They remind you that time doesn't just move forward. It loops. That everything you're going through, someone already survived. Someone already gave it words. And that's the secret of these forgotten American sayings. They were built to last because they were built from truth. They didn't hide pain. They gave it purpose. They didn't deny hardship. They turned it into language that could hold it. That's what made America's talk beautiful. It wasn't fancy, but it was faithful. It didn't promise miracles. It promised meaning. The last words of a vanishing America aren't gone forever. They're still sitting quietly inside us, waiting to be spoken again. They're in the laughter of old friends, in the patience of someone fixing what's broken, in the quiet strength of people who still believe in earning what they have. Maybe the next time life gets rough, you'll hear them too. Those echoes from another time. You'll whisper them without thinking. Better safe than sorry. You win some, you lose some. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And when you do, you'll feel it, that small connection to the generations before you. The ones who built this country word by word, Lesson by lesson, because even if the world changes, the wisdom doesn't. The phrases may fade, but the truth behind them never will. Every lost phrase is a door back to who we were. A country that spoke with care, thought before speaking, and carried humor even in the hardest days. These sayings aren't just old words. They're fingerprints of a nation that believed character could live inside language. And maybe, as you hear them again, you feel that same pull. The warmth, the familiarity, the comfort of something simple and true. Next time, we'll open another chapter in the story of a forgotten America. The small diners, the soda shops, and the jukebox dreams that once made every night feel like forever. And if you want to hold on to these memories, join the newsletter, where the past isn't gone, just waiting to be remembered. Because every old saying still has a heartbeat. You just have to listen long enough to hear it again,